Ciaran Mackel. I'd like to tell a short story, Colin will be glad to hear, about Belfast. This is, I suppose, about a former shipyard town, a former mill town, of which 30 of the 36 linen mill buildings have now been demolished in the last 30 years. It's a story of a very divided city in which two distinct communities have no shared communal memory. I'd like to start description about the documenting the Peace Walls project by just talking a bit about the city and giving an introduction to that first, if we could, please. Victor Papanak's book, Design for the Real World, proffered that designers contribute 10% of their time to voluntary activity. It paralleled Bernard Twomey's thesis in the 1970s, challenging us to consider the role of the architect in a changing society. Was the architect a form giver, a critic and commentator, or a revolutionary, using understanding of the city in order to be part of professional forces trying to arrive at new social and urban structures? All of that nurtured what are now my core values and beliefs in the architect as citizen, as urbanist, as activist, and as pro bono campaigner. The words of Pablo Neruda proved a working manifesto that gifts sprang he felt from brotherhood and consciously offered his art in recognition of his debt. In the swirl of political and cultural traumas, I completed my architectural professional examinations in the period of 1981 hunger strikes. The emotion and violence of that period and its legacy impacted on the development of my own architectural voice and influenced my view that it embeds architecture in the realm of power and politics. In the development of that position, my need or conscious desire to be transformative or creative had its roots in my early teens as I experienced from the sidelines the physical act of the rebuilding of a street by family, friends and neighbours. On the afternoon of the 15th of August 1969, 44 of the 65 houses on Bombay Street were burned to the ground. During 3 days of riots throughout working class areas of Belfast, 10 people were killed, street barricades erected, 1,500 families fled their homes, and 600 houses badly damaged, of which 170 were beyond repair. Bombay Street is the most famed in the collective memory of those times. Following a lack of civic leadership, a small group of Irish language enthusiasts who just completed a cluster of houses in Belfast Shaws Road decided to rebuild the street. They met with former residents of the street and agreed to form a housing association and to commence building work immediately. Work commenced 12th of December 1969 and keys to the first 10 houses were presented to people in June 1970. As a 14-year-old, my weekends were spent going to churches along the east coast from Belfast to Dublin, fundraising to help rebuild that street. Even as a teenager, the disinterested gaze was not enough. Even as a youth, I recognised the rebuilding of Bombay Street as a true sounding of the best aspects of my community, an instinct since born by experience. The reimagined Bombay Street community is the story of self-sacrifice, of self-reliance and self-realisation, and remains an outstanding example, I believe, of community activism. The group raised in today's terms €2.5 million by voluntary subscriptions to build 33 houses of high technical standard, acquiring title to the lands, moving the peace line, closing streets, resurfacing, landscaping the street, encouraging participation and building confidence towards collective ownership. And this all happened during 2 of the most turbulent years of the conflict and against a backdrop of government lethargy and procrastination. The rear wall of the houses on Bombay Street is the Shankill Falls Peace Wall. This is Bombay Street and that wall is 11 metres high and is the Falls Road side of that Shankill Falls wall. Belfast is a small pocket city full of edges, inert voids, nuts, bolts and old-time threepenny bits and stones. And in the context of post-industrialisation, which has intensified urban crises in many European cities, and where political violence is located as a surface expression of deeper socio-economic problems, areas of interface between neighbouring communities that contemporary history has now left socially non-connected remain the fringe and marginal areas in the city and seem permanent reminders of impermanent areas of fear and enduring blight. They seem doomed to paralysis and new development that could transform such a landscape of neglect. The city is currently enjoying the opportunity of making the most of Titanic's centenary. It follows a period of intense work to restore many of the city's major buildings, including the Ulster Hall, City Hall, the Glass House, the Botanic Gardens, and many, many others. After years of neglect and years of urban conflict, the city authorities and citizens now recognise the value of the built heritage, the value of the city itself as a heritage artefact. Belfast has a small population of 267,500, and actually there was 2 born this morning, and a small commercial city core of 270 hectares. There are more walls now in the city than there were in 1994 when the first ceasefires occurred, and the extent and height of those walls have continued to increase since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. The one sectarian orange state is now gone, to be replaced by a seemingly agreed sectarian city. There are 30.5 kilometres of peace walls in the city. There are subsequently 87 hectares of void spaces, shadow spaces in the city. That is 1/3 the area of the commercial city core. There are more than 30 walls over 11 metres high, one of which is 1690 metres long. They are taller than many street frontages in the city. The Shankill Falls Wall is now longer in existence than any peace wall in Europe. It is now almost 43 years old, and the walls are crude, brutal urban signatures. This is a map of the city, and the black line in the centre is the commercial core. That's the 270 hectares. And the areas in brown or orange rectangular squares are the areas in which are located all of the peace walls in the city. Belfast has a legacy of walls and representations of immutable barriers, evoking its irrevocable past. The lines of barricades erected since the 1880s during times of sectarian violence are even today circumscribed by so-called peace zones designed to keep communities apart. The walls and the resulting maps of green and orange neighbourhoods, initially identified by security personnel, have been often replicated to demonstrate the divisions in the city. The scandal of the walls and the voids around them is that they have been disinvested of capital and of attention by all of us who should know and have cared more. The walls and the void areas claim space and surface and challenge the regeneration agenda in the city. And for many citizens, the walls are their inheritance and protection, though I think some are more easily accepted than others. Whether that legacy is positive or negative is to be decided, I suppose, in time. Fred Scott's book on altering architecture, although largely focused on the particular spatial sensibility required by the process of alteration in reworking buildings, offers an intellectual foundation for alteration incorporating the two main principles of adaptation, spatial and surface reworking. The reworking of existing buildings and structures, I believe, often thought to be the sole territory of conservationists, is actually the most radical and controversial of all spatial disciplines. This text offers significant alternatives to the demolition of the built environment. Scott suggests that the process of intervention requires particular spatial sensibility, an art of response that is structured around dialogue with what is already there. There are lessons here, I believe, for a dialogical process that will excavate the meanings of community, the walls and the wasteland spaces, that will aerate notions of territory, collective memory, and individual and communal narrative in a city fused by negative inheritance in terms of urban morphology. There's more than one community, even in what are perceived political or ideological hinterlands. The urban wastelands, initially left vacant to give respite to community, have since become symbol of failed planning policies that once proposed business buffer zones and closed sanitised zones as means to deal with the physical space. The interface walls do more than separate two sections of the community. They cut across and destroy the urban fabric and urban grain. Once connected streets have been severed and truncated and not now possible to reconnect. The blank start face interface walls became a symbol of restricted horizons, both political, social and economic. And to quote Eston Evans' 1971 essay, Understanding Ourselves, the people living in such closed-in lowlands with restricted horizons tend to have a limited vision and imagination. But the walls are everywhere, not just in inner city communities faced with the harsh reality of their physical presence. Neighbourhood shops, city centre shops, some of them only until very recently, have solid steel shutters. That is, they reinterpret the walls of the peace walls. Many public buildings still remain behind high walls and fences, or in fact were built with blank facades. The hills that surround us, shared by all of us, remain the natural areas of vision and imagination. I believe that all I've said so far, in terms of my experience of the city in which I was born, the city in which I practice, the city in which I teach and undertake research, and the city I've presented in need of connected vision, all contributes to the methodology of our documentation of the walls as a heritage project. It is an interest in the concept and the built reality of neighbourhood and home that have given impetus to my practice to search for collective means to reimagine and reimage the potential of the interface communities. We are interested in making the case for interface areas, deserving of serious study and of urgent urban design work. In June 2011, we established an internship programme called Plus 100, which currently has a number of graduate architects and qualified architects and planners, and we began our detailed work for the interfaces. The contract at the plus 100 is that each member contributes 100 hours per month to the project on a voluntary basis. We are currently working to fully record and document all aspects of the walls. We anticipate that we will take 2 years to complete our archive. Architects, I believe, have analysis and documentation skills, although we probably believe it better than what we actually are in some ways. And we believe we can share these with a broader constituency to contribute to improved quality of life issues, and we are very keen to do so. Our process has been to prepare precise tabular studies and drawings and photographs that record in clear visual means the physical reality of the spatial construct. We have identified and mapped each of the 15 areas of the city in which the walls exist, and we have identified the 88 structures that could be seen or be understood as physical barriers or fences or walls. The interface structures and the calculation of areas do not include, for our current purposes, the adjacent derelict buildings or adjacent business parks that now largely lie empty. And this map, as I showed you earlier, indicates the location of each cluster area, and these follow the process of identification which have been named by numerous community organisations with whom we're working. We commenced by drawing and recording the Shankill Falls wall, the first locus of the peace walls. That's the top image, top drawing. And the Dunkirk Gardens wall, which is an area of the city in which up to 1/3 of the sectarian deaths suffered during the period of the conflict actually occurred. We have photographed and drawn each section of the wall in increments of 6 metres, that is in the known physical dimensions of the ordinary building blocks of our city. We have begun the process of gathering the statistical data on each wall that tabulate the dates of construction, the material of the structure, ownership of each wall, the group to whom responsibility for maintenance and repair or demolition would fall, the insurance issues, the government body responsibility for that maintenance, the names and the context of existing community contacts and groups, the ownership of all adjacent lands. Our intention is to gather all effects of the structures and void spaces. Our view is that information such as that will afford us the opportunity to present the material in exhibitions and conferences, but to offer that material as a means to engage with others to begin the process of removing the walls in the city. Although researchers are from all sections of the community, we believe that we act as observers, facilitating both communities to act as one in their desire to improve the physical space of their own neighbourhood, that we hopefully assist capacity building. We understand our work as inventory, that notes the material quality of the structures and records the layers of work over time. Some of the walls were built in decorative brickwork with railings above and beyond and behind them, and some were done to gentrify an area in preparation for a visit by Bill Clinton in 1998. Recently, one area of North Belfast, the community has actually removed one section of the wall. And in such evolving context, the International Fund for Ireland recently announced a fund of £2 million to begin the process of taking down the walls. These images are an area of Dunkirk Gardens, the first map 1965. This is the present day map where many of the buildings have been removed and demolished, and that's really because most of the void spaces you see in that image, that figure ground, act as the actual buffers and act as the walls. So the wall in some cases is the centre of the road, in other cases the wall is the back of a house or the front of a site. That demolished wall I referred to in North Belfast was done in an area which is now entirely one community, and yet was still a very slow process of engagement that required permissions and continuous dialogue. A number of years ago, the US-Ireland Alliance worked for many, many years to remove walls in time for the 10th anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, which was 5 years ago, or nearly another 6 or 7 years ago. That project became stalled due to the slow process of politics and the need for project workers to be involved at community level and to allow residents to work towards accepting the need for physical change. My practice is currently working with a group called Fourth Spring, which has a unique location as the only community building that straddles interface in Belfast. The two neighbouring communities to Fourth Spring, the Springfield Road and the Woodvale, which actually are adjacent to the Shankill and the Falls, are in the 10 most deprived electoral wards in the north. That interface was the first interface in Belfast, that is the area of the Bombay Street wall I showed you earlier on. Violence has decreased in recent years, but research and grassroots experience report that levels of sectarianism and polarisation have increased. Fourth Spring, I think, offers a different way, and we're working with those to try and do that. That wall in this photograph, to the left-hand side of it, there's a gate in the wall which takes you through to the back garden of a private house, and the back garden of the private house is the Shankill Road. That programme, the IFI programme, modest though it is, will contribute, I think, help communities in the city to develop projects and programmes that could challenge the existing cityscape as a legacy for the city. We believe our pro bono work complements that work, and in today's stringent economic climate, offer a collaborative process to vision and build towards participative design approach that will help configure a new time and a new place for what might be one Belfast. Urban design is about mutual interdependence of city and citizen. All these programmes, we feel, have a dominant benefit, we believe. The walls are a tragic but central component of the city's identity. They are representative of a deeper malaise within Northern Irish society. Sectarianism is not just confined to these areas. Documenting the walls is a step towards challenging the narratives that underpin sectarianism. Our work records, documents and reveals the details of the physical heritage artefacts. The challenge is to use that work to deal with the divisive impact on the city and to deal with the socio-economic relations of two or many communities in one city. The walls are the cracks between separate publics, between separate public provision, but there may be opportunity in such negative inheritance. The words of Leonard Cohen's song, Anthem, that there is a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in, is often used by architects to give poetic richness to in-between spaces, and that could provide a starting point. And this image of Shigeru Ban's curtain wall house in Tokyo, I believe, is a beautiful metaphor for material change. In conclusion, the voids in the city, the voids, the cavities in the built form, the built architecture are crucial components of the emerging and changing experience of the city. Space, as an ingredient of urban design, is the creative construct that shapes our experience of architecture and permits participative communication and exchange. Architects are well placed to understand the forces and mechanisms that shape the city and are equipped with the skills to articulate a vision for the future. Many are passionate about the city and its people, love its darkness and its light, love the lip of hills that hold us cradled in the mouth of flowing waters, and love the direct speech of fellow citizens. But they also desire a more socially inclusive policy agenda and seek the intellectual, emotional and physical space within which to make architecture. Our research work, we hope, contributes to that search. Ard Mackel.